feel like that way about a bunch of stuff. I'm always like, why does this email that I feel like I've done 1,000 times not autofill?
I don't know.
And
That
then
happens to me. That there's a few emails that for some reason it just doesn't. I'm like, I don't.
or it latches onto like the whatever your the tea and disgust email that I misspelled.
Oh,
And
now it auto always goes.
Oh yeah,
to
it
that.
always wants that one. It's like that's the one.
It's like that's not even anything, or just somebody's getting.
Is it going now?
It should be.
Can you hear me, world? People around the world who are listening.
We'll see. Probably nobody. Though it seems like YouTube's algorithm is really wacky these days. I've been getting almost all my recommendations are like, do you want to watch this video with 20 views on it? And you're like, I don't know. Every one I've looked on has been like a nothing video. Where it's like, why am I getting recommended this? So maybe it will get recommended to random people.
Hopefully. And then they'll be like, I wanted to watch a video with 0 views.
But seriously, it's been like videos where it's just like, there's one where it's just like this Japanese woman that just says like hello to like a Skype call getting answered, and it just like plays like a random song for like 7 minutes. And then it just ends with her being like, okay, bye. And you're like, I thought something was gonna happen, just like nothing happened. And all the comments were like, why did I get this video? Anyway. It's all going. Also, his paintings are pretty awesome.
Yeah, they are.
I like his work.
All right. So, yeah, my mini topic, just real quick. So, my wife got essentially named our first 2 children, so I get to name the rest. And she's pretty adamant that I get to name them whatever I want. Like, it's 100% my choice. So, I might be overthinking it just a teeny bit. But here's my, like, interesting thing is, I was thinking about, like, how we name kids. And it's weird how...
What the heck?
Uh-oh.
Why is it being stupid?
Oh, no.
Well, nobody's watching yet, so
Yeah.
it's fine. I'll figure it out.
Um,
Keep going.
Yeah. How we name kids. Pretty much just... So, in our culture, it's either we name them... With lots of different exceptions, but in general, either we name them after somebody, or we name them something because it kind of sounds vaguely cool to us. But there's not like a strong reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'm like getting in my head too much about it, but I'm like, I don't want to name him something just because I'm like, I like the name James.
Yeah, I feel like that's...
But that's like how we do. But
yeah.
So here's the trouble is that nothing has any, none of our names like have any meanings. Because you can go back, right? You can be, like, I can't remember what name I looked up, but I looked up like the name that means wisdom. And right, it's like, I don't remember what it is. It's like,
There's probably multiple.
Eliza, hello. Eliza.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
If you can hear me, since it does not say that you're on there. Whatever, it's...
Yeah, it doesn't say we have any viewers, but...
Eliza, can you hear me?
her comment is definitely there.
So, yeah, I looked it up. I don't remember what it was, right? So I'll just make up a name. Say it's like Sean or something.
Yeah.
But that doesn't like mean anything to anybody. Nobody's like, "Oh yes, you named your son Sean. Wisdom." Like
Yeah.
that. It's like
At one point, it was.
yeah. It's like Welsh from like 1,000 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, and it like doesn't mean that anymore.
Yeah. It's just
Sean.
that's the name of that kid that I knew in middle school.
Yeah, that's like how people name people or name their kids as well. They're like, "Oh no, you can't name your kid Sean because I knew a Sean and he sucked." That's it's like pretty common.
Yeah.
I mean, me and my wife were like, "Oh, not that name. I knew that kid."
Yeah. It's got bad memories.
But yeah, it's interesting because you can go look up a name.
Yeah.
And the name like doesn't have its meaning anymore. But even if you go like look up the like I kind of like James, and I looked up James, and I guess James is just like I don't remember what it's not. I don't know if it's anglicized, but we'll say it's for the sake of this. We'll say it's like an anglicized Jacob. And then Jacob,
Yeah.
it's something Jacob, like it's like European something, somebody took Jacob and that became James. So James is Jacob, and what Jacob means is the usurper, because Jacob stole Esau's birthright.
Yeah.
Which that's like, I was kind of like, I don't like that. I don't want to name my kid like the usurper.
Yeah.
Like if I, not that it has not that it has that meaning.
I know, but you're kind of like, why would you? It's like, why would I name my kid that?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's interesting because but then if I go the other direction and I name my kid something, which I don't even know, like what kind of convention I'd use.
It's like,
how do you name a kid something with like meaning? And if I do, are they just gonna have a stupid weird name that like does?
name?
I don't even like know what that would be. Like a place, maybe?
I mean, you could just name them Wisdom.
Yeah.
Just kind of going back to... Because that's the thing is, like, if you think about it, you know, those... Like, if you go far back enough with a name, you're like, oh, at one point, this specifically in, like, Hebrew or Latin or Greek or something literally meant... like
wisdom.
It's like so it's like they would have just called somebody like that.
Yeah.
This is literally just like, oh yeah, we just named you after this like concept.
Yeah, or their name is something like beautiful mountain or like running horse or something.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, in Japanese, a lot of names are essentially that. It's like literally just like the characters for their name means.
The Latin version of Justin's dad's name. I wonder what the Latin version of my dad's name. My dad's name is Christopher, which almost sounds like it's Christ
probably
something. Christopher. Christoph.
It's I don't know. It's probably like some like. I feel like that would be like a Greek to like almost German or Scandinavian.
Yeah, Christopher.
Yeah, I don't know though. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the
something with Christ, but yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge deal. I can't think of like anything that I think of that I'm like that's kind of cool. I'm like that's weird though. Like I can't.
I don't know.
I had thought of like just naming them like an attribute, like you said, wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like horrible. It is a little bit like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like Victorian or something, where you're like, oh yes, here comes prudence and
Yeah.
chastity.
Yeah.
But it's that's not.
Earnest.
Yeah, it's not like.
Some work better than others.
Yeah, no, that's true too.
Like Ernest. That was just
Ernest.
sounds like a name, but
Yeah.
it's actually just
Oh, interesting.
essentially naming your kid honesty or
Yeah.
something.
Um.
There's got to be a few that work, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It also kind of goes with a like running sub theme of what we've talked about, where I don't feel like, in some ways, I don't feel like like our cultures. I don't know. Oh, okay, I don't feel like I have a culture. I feel like these names are like I'm getting them from like somewhere else, right?
It's it's like
Philip. Oh, sorry, Philip. You need to turn this so you can see it too.
I
Right.
can see it.
Oh,
I
okay.
have like a little mini
you-
chat
okay.
that I can see. I can kind of see it there too.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
I mean, I could
I was-
tilt this a little bit.
I just didn't know if you could see it.
I mean, my middle name is Earl, but Earl like literally is like Earl like the n- nobility class. That's like what that means. It's like Duke or Baron or something.
After your father
That's what
lost his or gave up his title to move to the United States, and he was like, you would have been an earl.
Um,
Wait, I've told this story a million times because it's just, you've probably heard this, but it's just funny. In high school, there was this family, and their sons in like in a past life would have been like Viking berserkers.
uh-huh.
They're just these like gigantic like brutes.
Yeah.
And so they had a bunch of them. And so the youngest, who was a couple grades younger than me, the youngest son, they just straight up named him Raider. Like the other boys are named like Carl and Bob and John or whatever. The youngest son just named Raider because I think by then they were like, we know what we're getting. Like these kids are all like football stars and like like mow down all the other kids on the field. So yeah, that's my. Again, I might just be like. I might be just being silly, and maybe I should just follow my culture and name my kid something that I think sounds kind of cool. I don't know. I was just thinking about it. I'm like, I don't like.
I mean, I think it's good to
I just don't.
have like a reason behind it, or
I
like
want to.
something, because yeah, like naming them like a something like that, like a something like a virtue concept or something, or even like naming them after somebody can be good. Like if it's you're naming it after somebody that either like you have respect for or something.
Yeah.
It's like that, because in a way it's a similar thing, right? Where you're like, oh, this person embodies something that I appreciate, and I would like to see that in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's better than just being like, I like the name David.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of my problem is
You know.
yeah, the name I have a few names I like, and there's like no reason beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I've like gone throughout like people, like historical figures or authors or whomever that I really like, and every time I think of one, I'm like, oh man, I don't like I really like Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
Though individually, I do not like the name Ralph at all.
Yeah.
And Waldo.
You could
Waldo's
call
kind
him
of a,
Emerson.
I could call him Emerson.
Emerson's kind of a. I mean, yeah.
I think
That's
actually,
a decent name.
and I think it's actually kind of trendy.
Or Waldo.
That's Waldo's like.
It's too
part of,
goofy.
I know part of me really likes Waldo, but I'm like I can't do it. Waldo's
At some point, Waldo would have been like a normal name.
yeah.
Now it's like sounds weird.
Yeah, Waldo, you can't do Waldo. Also, name's really permanent. It's like a tattoo.
Yeah. I mean, you can technically get it changed.
Yeah,
but
well, you can
that's
remove a tattoo as well.
Yeah.
So, for instance,
But that, yeah.
I also like. That's where it like. Yeah, it's like a tattoo in that like there's stuff that I like or that I'm currently into and that I think is cool and I'm like, okay, but will I be into it in like 10 years?
Yeah.
Which is my big problem with tattoos.
Yeah.
Is I'm like, man, if I'd gotten a tattoo of something I was into like 5 years ago, now I'd be like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
There's very few things I could think of.
Tattoos are, yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, but that's just my like. It's like the same kind of thing where I'm like.
Well, that's the thing is like a tattoo's similar, exactly the same sort of thing where it's like if you get it for like a reason, like there's actual like substantive like meaning to you.
Yeah.
Then it makes sense. But if it's just like, oh boy, I sure do like Pokemon.
Which seems like a lot of what.
A lot. But who knows? It's like maybe in like 10 years you might be like, I mean, I don't like hate Pokemon, but also it's like, why'd I get this Pikachu tattoo? It's like, maybe you'll be fine with it, but also maybe you'll be like,
I feel like
But.
Even if I had gotten something, like some like poetry or something that I was into 10 years ago, now I'd be kind of like, okay. Like, again, Ralph Waldo Emerson. I really like Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had, like, a tattoo of, like, a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote, I'd probably wouldn't be, like... Yeah, I wouldn't be, like, thrilled right now.
No.
Oh, man. It was, like, a few months ago, Madeline was listening to a podcast. Some comedians. I don't know who they were, but the host was clearly super into tattoos, and I think got the impression they had a lot of tattoos.
Yeah.
And the one person was like, well, I don't know, I thought about getting like a clown popping out of a mailbox. It was stupid. And
yeah.
The host was like, haha, that's awesome, you should totally get that. And I wanted to like track him down and like slap him around and be like, don't tell him to get a tattoo of that stupid thing. It was like the worst idea I've ever heard. Yeah, tattoos, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some tattoos are cool looking, but about 90% of them are not.
Yeah. And it depends so much. I've had a number of coworkers that have quite a few tattoos. And a lot of them I'm like, I wouldn't have made that decision, but if you're okay with it, whatever.
Yeah.
But I know I had one of my coworkers, she has her first tattoo she got. She's still like, I wish I didn't have this. It's like I regret getting this tattoo. And it's not even like terrible.
Oh, but
It's like innocuous. I'm like kind of like, I don't know, I've seen ones that are much more like embarrassing to have.
It's like Kalachi wearing a Riddler hat.
It's like literally just like her like astrological sign or something. But she's like, it was the first one she got, and she got it just to like piss off her mom or something. And I think that aspect of it, she's kind of like, that was a stupid reason to get this tattoo. But she has tons of other ones. So it's like, but yeah. It's like sometimes you make a decision like that you're like, this was kind of stupid. But yeah, with like names, but it's like, with a name though, the problem is you're not the one that has to deal with it in a way. you have to deal with it like secondhand. And so it's like you have that weight of like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm giving this to somebody and they have to live with it their whole life.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, most names it's probably like kind of whatever.
But the thing is,
There aren't many names that I think you can give people that they're going to be like, I hate that my parents gave me this name.
Yeah.
But it's like, still, it's like, I think there should be thought to it.
Yeah, I just haven't, again, stuff that I'm into, stuff that's meaningful, I'm not sure how to, like, translate this into a name.
Uh-huh.
Or, like...
You could just do a symbol, a shape.
The baby formerly known as...
Yeah.
The baby formerly
only
known as...
Go the Prince route.
Yeah.
I think that's illegal now. I don't think you can do that anymore.
Oh.
Also, I think you can't have numbers.
You can't have numbers?
I think you can't have like you could write out the word 3, but you couldn't have like the numeral 3 in a name. I believe. I'm
well, that's
not
good.
certain, but
I mean, that's not good. It's. I wasn't gonna use any numbers. I don't think.
You just number your kids.
Yeah. This was just gonna be 3. I'm like, this is easy, but I can just spell it out. Yeah. Don't quite know what to do. Again, got kind of in my head about this one because it's 100% my choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of me is like, yeah, I want this to be like super meaningful, or like, but then, yeah, it's just not. Our culture just doesn't do it. And
Everything's very just. It's I was gonna say earlier. It's like
7 of 9.
Yeah. It's kind of junk spacey, honestly.
It is junk spacey.
It's just all over the place.
Yeah, well, because
some people have. What was the name? My old manager, he mentioned that I think his like brother's son is like named like Tiger Fireball something, and it's like, oh my gosh. It's like something. It's like their first name's Tiger and their middle name's like Fireball or something. And you're like, oh, why? That's actually one where it's like that kid's gonna be like, why the hell did my parents name this?
Unless he
Tiger
really
might be okay.
I actually have thought of Tiger Toby.
Yeah, Tiger's potentially
It's potentially,
okay.
But again, it's like bordering.
It's borderline.
You're like stepping into silly territory, which I already did kind of, because even though, it's my son's middle name is Wolfgang, for no other reason than I thought it was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Which, the minute I did that, I kind of regretted it. Although it's kind of like, now it's kind of charming.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
But I didn't like have a reason. I was just like, ha 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 ha, Wolfgang.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's. But now he's got all sorts of cute nicknames because of it.
Mm-hmm. No, Wolfgang's a good.
Wolfgang's a cool name.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that I was 100% because it was funny. I also thought it was a cool name.
Yeah.
I was like, Wolfgang. Like, just what kind of a name
There's
is that?
There's a few cool
wolves?
people with that name.
Yeah, Wolfgang.
From history and whatnot.
Well, Tiger's one of those where if you're like, if this kid's cool, then Tiger will be a cool name forever.
But if they're not, then they're just like weird.
Yeah, which like there was
you're either like really cool kid or you're like really not cool.
Yeah, there was a.
And it like makes it worse.
I feel bad. May this never get to these random people that were in an award once where we're kind of awkward people.
Mm-hmm.
And they named their son D'Artagnan,
Oh yeah.
and D'Artagnan was not a heroic, strapping adventurer. D'Artagnan was like an awkward little kid.
Like makes it worse.
Yeah, you're like, man, I don't know, man, not D'Artagnan.
Yeah. That's a yeah.
Like you're like if you knew a kid in high school and they're an awesome kid, they can have whatever name they want. If their name is D'Artagnan, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then you're like, great, D'Artagnan.
Mm-hmm. That one's also like getting into the naming your kid after a fictional character zone, and that's like very
Yeah.
iffy waters, I think.
Yeah, if it's not from I can't make a joke if I can't remember the name of the thing. What's the Mickey Mouse RPG with the anime?
Oh, Kingdom Hearts.
If it's not from Kingdom Hearts, not a good name. That's my joke. That was my joke. I say that because I have some friends that did that. Again, may they never hear this. They won't.
Yeah, that's like
But that was a questionable choice.
yeah, that's something I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's too it's in the goofy zone, and it's in the it's like I don't know. It feels very wrong.
You don't think I should name my future son Anakin?
Oh. It's just weird. Like, I feel like if you do, it has to be from like mythology or something.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to name him like Ulysses or something like that.
Dude, actually Ulysses,
Ulysses is a pretty cool name.
that's a pretty cool name, and Ulysses is hard to be like, you're like, here.
I mean,
this is like the
it's
greatest
a little-
boss in all of history.
It's like a little bit of D'Artagnan territory, but it's softened a bit.
It's softened because, like you said, it's mythology. Also because it's been used a lot as an
Yeah.
actual name by actual people.
Yeah. But it's a good name.
Ooh.
Doesn't
I don't think I'm
sound
naming
too
my
weird.
son Ulysses, but I like it a lot, actually.
yeah.
Ulysses.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. But yeah. Romulus
Romulus.
or Remus.
A little Star Trekky.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But I know what you mean.
yeah.
But
It would get
Romulus
confused.
itself is
Yeah.
Romulus.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Scipio.
Scipio. I'm trying to think of. If we go back.
Cicero. Just after like ancient people.
Heraclitus.
Yeah. Pyrrhus. Hannibal. Charlemagne.
Charlemagne. Let's see. Oh my gosh, my late night brain. Churchill.
Winston.
No, Churchill.
Just Churchill.
Winston after my favorite gorilla. No, yeah, Churchill, just because that's what my first son looked like. Because
He does.
the fat little baby.
Yeah.
We have all these pictures of him like sitting in chairs, looking very somber,
Mm-hmm.
like he's going to like
Should have him like with like a little cigar.
yeah, like he just looks like he's about to go like negotiate peace or not surrender or something. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's not
Yeah.
something I ever thought about, but like, yeah,
How do you decide a name?
how our culture does names, and how
It's kind of arbitrary
it is kind of
for the most
arbitrary, and
part.
we like don't have. Again, so like we come from
Oh.
like if I want to be like a little traditional, like my essentially, my whole family's more or less English, right?
Mm-hmm.
With all sorts of other European things, but more or less English.
Yeah.
And so, I could just be like, okay, we'll just do some English names. Again, like James. Like James is like the example of the name that I think is nice. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just like the name James, but I like don't have any other reason besides that. Or I could be like, well, there's some kings
Yeah.
that were James.
Yeah. A lot of king names are pretty like kind of in that same territory. It's
Yeah.
like George, Henry,
Well,
Richard,
William.
William, um, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, because I'm kind of out of people that I want to like name my kids after. As
Mhm.
far as like just direct, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I could. There's still, I don't know. Yeah, it's like the most like meaningful thing we do is like naming our kids after like a recent family member.
Mhm. Yeah, like a grandparent,
Yeah,
great grandparent, or
yeah, like Eliza was saying, they name their son after Justin's father.
mhm.
That's like, it's like other than that, you're like, I'm just naming them this because it's cool, or it
Mhm.
sounds like cool in the moment. Or you're like, that's just like a nice name, like James. Like,
Mhm.
it's just like you're like that's just like a nice name.
Yeah.
I don't know. I might do that and then might go crazy in the middle name. That's like kind of my strategy right now.
Maybe you do Ulysses as a middle name.
Ulysses. And you and there's like it's funny because you can go like Hebrew or Greek.
Mhm.
Again, like if you go, I mean you can name people whatever you want. You might get away with it, but if you go like I like a lot of Eastern stuff. If you go there, it starts getting
Yeah, there's a certain point where it's like
you can't.
you're like it's just like yeah, it's like a weird like disconnect.
Yeah, like I can't
Yeah,
name
like
my son like Running Horse
yeah,
or like yeah. There's like
you couldn't give him like a Korean name.
yeah.
It'd be so weird.
Yeah, I was like,
It would be really weird.
yeah,
You'd be like, huh? It's like one of your parents Korean? No. Like, okay. That might be funny though, like when they get into school and there's like roll call for the first time.
spelling something out. Let's see.
Yeah, the initials. You expel something with the initials. Yeah.
James, Ulysses, Toby, Judd.
You could just do like Latin American middle names, or you give them a bunch of middle names. You just have like weird like compound names.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know. Sorry, I didn't mean to take so long on this, but like yeah, it's like do something that, or do like a name that's not my culture, and that's the problem is they're not my culture, but my culture's like junk space names kinda.
Yeah.
Again, not everything is. That's why I'm like, am I just like overthinking it? But
Mhm.
it is like a little like it's just like all these names, and there's not like a meaning. They're just like I don't know. They're just like nice names. Again, you're like David. You're like, yeah, sure. Like, David's a nice name.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like the name David.
Yeah.
Like, where's David from? It's from David Bible.
Yeah. This is like literally just
Yeah.
a Bible name. You could do a really obscure Bible name.
It is weird.
Just find like the most obscure name you can find from like the Old Testament.
It is funky. It's weird. It's not weird. It's just when you're so used to hearing name like Jacob, and then like I said, I dug into it a little bit, and you're like, oh yeah, it's a Hebrew name. It's like Jacob or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're so used to it. But you're like, oh, it's like a very different sounding name from a very different time and place.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But I mean,
Jack's a cool name.
Jack is a pretty good name. Yeah, Ezekiel. Zeke.
Oh,
That's Zeke comes from Ezekiel.
Yeah.
That's a
Where
weird.
does Jack come from? Is Jack just Jacob?
Probably. It's
I
from
had- Dude. Yeah.
Zebulon.
Yep.
That's a good one. But also it's like it sounds like a space alien.
Yeah. I have a little cousin that's Zebulon. Actually, it's Zeke and Zebulon. And they're Old Testament names, but they're not actually. They're named after grandparents.
Okay.
So they got away with, but yeah, there's Zeke and Zeb.
I can make that work.
Zebulon.
I like that Zeke and Zeb though. That's a fun combo.
And they're cool kids, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
again, if you're cool, you can get away with being named,
Hezekiah.
yeah, like Shadrach or whatever the brother of Jared's
Abednego.
name is.
Yeah.
What?
Like Shem or something.
What's the brother of Jared's name? Mahanrai Morian.
Mahanrai, there's a artist, Mahanrai Young, did like sculpture work and stuff. And like around the same time as Robert Henri.
Mahanrai, huh?
Yeah. He actually did some cool stuff. He was like Brigham Young's like great grandson or something.
I was about to say Mahanrai Young sounds like the most Mormon name.
He's from.
If he wasn't Mormon, I was gonna be shocked.
Have you seen the John Hurd exhibit at the MOA?
No,
I wonder if
we haven't been.
It's probably still. So John Hurd was like the cartoonist of the 20s, and he was from Utah somewhere. But he was good friends with Mahanrai Young. They like hung out in New York a bunch.
Wait, John Hurd. Interesting.
Which that might be a segue to what we're talking about.
Yeah, we've this gone way too long.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a.
So they were like turn of the century, like teens, 20s, 30s artists. And Robert was kind of about that same time and a little bit earlier. He was like around the same time as a lot of the people we've read, where it's like late 1800s, early 1900s.
It's always. I know that history is always busy.
Yeah.
And there's always stuff happening,
Mm-hmm.
but it feels like at the end of the 1800s, there's just like this explosion of everybody. Just every
It's
time
like
I look up a thing, it's like, oh yes, this person was like active in like 1880 or something.
And you're like, oh, what the heck? Everybody was doing stuff.
Everybody. Like the other day.
There was a lot going on.
I was reading a thing by the Hindu Hindu teacher who he was the one who kind of first brought stuff to the West around that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, and then he was hanging out in London, and he was hanging out with Tesla, and he was hanging out with like Rockefeller, and and it was just like this list of names, and I was like, did everyone live right then? Just everybody?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Again, I know there's always stuff going on, but
I know, but it was like weirdly dense.
yeah,
Like around 1900 plus or minus like 20 years.
yeah,
There's like an unusually high level relative to the population of like really influential people.
yeah.
Just like a lot of stuff was happening really quickly.
Yeah, and it's like everything.
Yeah.
It's like
Well, so like it's like photography and film
Yeah,
and
that's-
like audio recording were all invented then. Like electricity was kind of made like a normal thing. Automobiles, like basically everything that we think of as like normal parts of modern life were kind of came into being then. So much of like just so many things, so much like everything kind of was going crazy at about that time.
yeah. Every time I like run into a thing that I like, I'm like, oh, this also just fits right in there. Same with this guy, Robert Henri, as the audiobook says.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
I don't know. I don't know if that's actually how it is. It's just
He feels like because you listen to the same thing I listen to, where the guy's doing like his with music and stuff.
I don't know if there was music.
Oh, then maybe
Maybe
not.
it's a different one.
Oh, I'm listening to it on YouTube, and this guy's
I was
got.
listening to an Audible version.
Dude, you should listen to this YouTube version. He like has like extended musical numbers in between segments. And at first I was annoyed by it. But he actually I don't know, it's like thoughtfully placed.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. Like
Mhm.
there'll just be like this pause and there'll be like 2 minutes of music.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's weird, but I kind of like it.
I'll have to check that out.
But that's two people who called him Robert Henri, so it's
So that
probably
must be
anyway.
Robert Henri. Either way.
Yeah, Henry sounds more like what it should be. Oh, he looks mean in this picture too.
Yeah,
He looks like he would give, like, he can like join Miyazaki in the pantheon of artists that I don't want to run into. who'd be like, oh well, I see that your whole soul is not in your art.
Yeah, I kind of wonder because a lot of the critique letters he has are generally like positive.
They're really nice. He sounds really nice.
But also, I wonder if you did something that wasn't very good, what he would say.
I don't know. He sounds so nice.
I know.
He might have just been nice, and we're judging him off of his stern-looking face.
I mean, he definitely says some like digging things about some artists, though.
Yeah.
But it's more like it's never like anything specific, but it's usually just like he's like artists that do work in this particular way are doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Especially like a lot of like he's very much against like copying things.
Yeah. So,
to the point of he's like you should ideally not even like be looking at the model when you're doing like figure drawing. It's like you should look at it and then try and just draw it from memory.
So Philip, with the help of the ghost of the late David Lynch, found this book, which is The Art Spirit by Robert Henri, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how everyone says it on the internet. And man, this is a good find. This was a good find.
Yeah,
This rocks.
I know. I love it.
Yeah, I'm like 2/3 the way through, maybe, like the audio book, or
Mm-hmm.
in this case, this guy who's reading it
Mm-hmm.
and calls it a performance because he's putting music with it. I don't know. He does a good job though, but it's really really great. So
Yeah.
this is a good find. I'm straight up. I like need this book to own.
I mean, he does repeat stuff because it'll be from different lectures,
Yeah.
and obviously he's gonna say the same thing.
That's good
But
though.
it is, yeah. Well, it helps you like kind of understand his approach because you're like, okay, this is something that he like really cares about and wants people to know. But makes me want to do oil painting because a lot of
I
the oil
know.
painting things is like I don't use oil paint, so I actually don't really know what he's talking about.
Although a
But-
lot of it,
but it's still,
makes
like-
sense in other mediums, like
Yeah.
talking about like how a brush stroke could, it's anything that had a brush. You
Yeah.
could apply like the brush stroke chapter.
Yeah, he talks about that a lot.
So
But I just, yeah, very much like you shouldn't think of it as a line. Like you should have purpose for like what that symbol represents when you're placing a line. So like when you're drawing with a pen or when you're laying down a stroke with your brush, it's like what is this symbol? What's basically it's like what is the word that this represents in a way, not literally but like if that was a word in a sentence
yeah, and well,
in a way it's like
how does it contribute to like what the painting is like
Yeah.
saying, kind of under the like what's like the painting's like, not like intellectual message, but like what's like the what's the painting like saying?
well so it's just
That's
there's
not the right word.
basically there's like a whole bunch of things going
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
the consideration of it.
we
But a lot of because that's kind of in like the technical sense a lot of that, but also so much of it is like mindset and like knowing. He talks about knowing yourself a lot
yeah.
and the importance of that, which makes sense because his whole concept with like creating art is about taking basically what you've seen and experienced and channeling it through yourself to create sort of like I'm trying to think of how to word it. Basically to create your image or whatever, but he's like, you shouldn't be thinking of it that way. It's like a window into who you are in a sense. Because like whatever it is that you produce is going to manifest your state of mind at the time of creation. And knowing yourself is important because that's how you can like harness that and like be purposeful and be ordered in the creation process. Because like if you're uncertain, what you create will be uncertain.
Yeah.
Sort of a thing. Because it's very much like all about the internal in with yourself and with what you're working on. He has some line, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like
Speaking of which, we got all
you're
Yeah.
like
his rockin' quotes in here.
what is it? It was like you're not drawing the external world, you're drawing like the internal of life or something. I can't remember. I don't remember. I just
There were too many.
because I was
good
just
lines.
listening to it. It's like I don't have words to like, and I was like at the gym, so I was like I can't write this down anywhere. But it was basically like you're not just drawing like, if you're doing a landscape, you're not just painting a mountain. You're painting like
Your experience.
the experience and like what that scene is like internally, not just like the surfaces, but it's like basically what isn't seen explicitly is actually what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So, the one thing he says a couple times, he repeats this. So, step one. So you say you just as an example, you see like a mountain scene that like does like it stirs you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're like, oh, this is like beautiful, or like the cloud, whatever thing it is that like you get that moment of, I don't know what you would call it, but like, where you get that kind of like thrill of beauty.
Yeah.
So his step one would be, you need to be able to like retain that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of us get that, like, we see like the trees like blowing in like the wind, and we're like, whoa, you get that moment. But so
Yeah.
his step one is kind of like, you retain that. You have to be able to like consciously kind of like keep a hold of that, and then you got to be a good enough painter
Mm-hmm.
to like express that feeling, like where your soul kind of like was, like that mountain range kind of like gave you that like transcendental beauty experience.
Yeah.
And so yeah, then not just like technical, it's almost kind of like implied that you're like kind of like technically proficient.
Mm-hmm.
But but like
But
he
even
says,
then, he
and
he
then
even says like
yeah,
it that doesn't matter so much.
yeah,
Because again, like he definitely has a lot to say about like people that are like really good like technical drawers or painters, where it's like, but it feels dead,
yeah,
even though it's like a perfect copy of the model before them or the landscape. It's like they're just duplicating. And that's why he talks about like, it's like, you're not trying to get just the surface,
yeah,
the external. You're trying to get the internal of the world.
yeah. You're not trying to just like proficiently paint the mountain that you're like looking at,
Mm-hmm.
but again, it's, you have to like capture that, like what that mountain did for you in that moment.
Yeah.
And once you've got that, you've got to like express it.
Yeah.
And if you do it correctly, then you almost get the Tolstoy thing, where your art would hopefully convey like that experience to someone else.
Yeah. The infection,
Yeah.
the art, the infection of beauty or whatever. I can't remember what exactly his term was. But yeah. Because also he talks about the importance of learning how to see,
Yeah.
and how that's actually the actual real tricky thing, is knowing how to see. And like, because I know there's that section where he talks a lot about specifically like beauty and how you perceive it, and how people may perceive the same thing as beautiful, but why they perceive it as beautiful could be different. But then he goes into, it's like, you need to be able to see what it is and understand yourself and what it is that you're seeing and why it's beautiful and what it is that's like getting you. And then yeah, retaining that.
Retain it and then express it.
Yeah, like you have to be able to have that understanding, instead of, because it's like anybody could see something and be like, wow, that's beautiful, and maybe they might not be able to explain it.
Yeah.
And just be like, I just like the way it looks, or the colors are pretty. But like being able to like really understand that, and being able to use it, because I mean, one point he makes with that, and this is more of like a technical thing, like a compositional thing. He's like, if you can know that and retain it when you're working on your piece, you know where to start and you know what the focus is. So it's like if you're doing a painting of a mountain and you notice like the kind of the way the colors work between, like, say the way the sun's setting light like is on the mountain versus like the shadow color or something, and you're like, that relationship of those colors is what I recognize as being beautiful to me. That's the important thing. So like if your way of going about that could be abstract, and it maybe you just make something that's those colors specifically, you're taking that thing. It could just be like a color field thing that you make where it's just the two colors, but it's still taking that thing and expressing that beauty that you saw. Or you could do that landscape and like apply it there too, but it's like you understand that thing and why it worked for you, and so you're able to carry that through. And say you were doing the landscape, it's like that was what you would focus on. Maybe you wouldn't like noodle around on some tree somewhere and putting in detail that you don't need to, because that's not the important thing. But it's about recognizing that and being able to see it. And then, yeah, being able to keep that and know. You need to know.
Yeah, it's almost like if you talk about intellectual things, like if you were to write an essay or write a screenplay, right? People have kind of got this down where, like, say I write an essay and I need to like know what like my argument is, like the thing I'm arguing for is like the main theme, and then you build everything around that and that like makes sense. But he's like almost saying that like for a feeling.
Yeah.
Like you need to like have like the theme of your painting, which is, you looked at the mountain touched by, a golden sunset and it like moved you. And so he wants you to like be like self-aware and thoughtful and be like, okay, I understand. Like you like retain that, and yeah, you're like, I understand how I felt about that, and I'm like build everything in this painting around that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, that's basically, yeah.
Oh man, he was like, it was like uh, it's like the art appreciation chapter in the book of tea, but this is like a whole book like pulled out of that
Basically.
and by an actual artist, which is
Mm-hmm.
better, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I was about to crack the book open. I'm like, I don't know where anything is in this. I've only listened.
What was I gonna say? He has a lot. He doesn't.
We almost.
He's all over the place. I like that he talks about how much he doesn't like art prizes, like jury vote art contest stuff. He brings up some really good points about it, where he's like, if you're producing the art to try and win that, you're kind of completely missing the point of how you should be doing it anyway. It's like it's always going to have a distorting effect on the art. And it also, he's like, anyway, it's like, how do you even like properly judge that in the first place? He's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
He's like, if the real way it should be judged is, does somebody buy your art or not? Sort of a thing. His whole thing is like, there should be like little art galleries everywhere. Among his like, in my ideal world, sort of things that he goes on every once in a while. He's like, there should be little art galleries everywhere in like neighborhoods that people can go and check out, and if they want to, buy art from there. He's like, that sounds nice. I don't know, it's not practical, but
No,
it sounds
well,
nice.
it was his stuff like that was just yet another thing made me sad about. You're like, oh well, there's like no art galleries.
Yeah.
Kind of like kind of like how we've talked about, where we're like, well, we just don't have like any public gardens.
Yeah.
There's no art gallery. I mean, that's not 100% true. There's a couple around,
But not much. Yeah.
not much. And there's this weird. This is a tangent. We don't have to go further down, but like, it's gonna sound mean, but if you go into like into a city, into like a coffee shop or something, I say that because coffee shops do this a lot, especially. You'll see they've hung up a bunch of art that you can buy. And they'll be like local artists, and it's all just a lot of it's just dreadful.
Oh yeah.
A lot, and because on the one hand you're like, oh good, right?
Yeah.
It's like a step in the right direction, but it's like either it's just super duper amateurish, which is fine. You got to start somewhere, or it's like very pop culture, a lot of pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, they drew Bowser, good, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, and we don't need to go too far down that, but
yeah,
like when there is like art in like a little mom and pop shop.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the owner or something, like oh, I have a friend that does art.
Yeah, or
something like that.
Yeah, and you're like,
oh, this regular, they make art. They're here like every day. I don't know. I'm sure there's many vectors by which.
Yeah, and you're like, well,
that art ends up there.
Like, if I want to buy like a bunch of prints of Sailor Moon, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I sell art in a little place.
Yeah, but is it Sailor Moon?
No, it's flowers and pears. And I sell some. I actually had, like, somebody came and bought all of my prints that I had in the Kolache shop.
I also know for a fact
ago.
that yours are a little nicer than a lot of the stuff that I've seen just in, like, some of these random restaurants in Provo. That's not even flattery. That's just, like, straight up.
Yeah,
the ones I'm thinking of are... I feel like I'm being so mean. You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I've had like a teeny bit of training. Even so, I'm like not a great artist.
Oh, I feel like I'm terrible. Especially... the thing is, reading this book has like made me want to paint a lot more.
Know.
But also, it's like when I sit down to paint, I'm like, this is like, it kind of feels overwhelming now. I'm like overthinking things. I feel like, because I'm like, I haven't truly captured a feeling about this that I am conveying. But the thing is, there's truth to it though. So that painting I have over there that I'm working on, I've been working on it way too long, and it's a sort of a commission for a coworker of mine. Just because we didn't like agree on like a price or anything, so I'm kind of taking my time, but I agreed to do it. So, whatever. But also, it's like, because he has a, Robert Henri talks about how like, you can tell, like, if an artist has like fussed around with something, and it's like, what it brings across isn't like the same feeling as if somebody like truly was like into it.
Yeah.
Because it's like the real thing that's been like imbued in that work is like the frustration and like pain that the artist went through to like grind through that. rather than they're just like, oh, I love this. I love these flowers, and look, not effortlessly, but it's like I cared and like felt the beauty that I saw in these flowers to make this thing. That's how I feel with that one.
That you fussed
But
around.
but I'm like, I need to finish it. I know I'm like fussing around, and it is like kind of like burning my brain painfully to do it, but I just need to get it done, which makes me feel bad. But also, it's like part of it too, I think, is that I'm not like working from any real reference besides like random pictures, and I'm trying to like construct the flower from not even real experience. But also, is like I didn't feel like buying some flowers, and
Yeah.
especially since it's like they'd probably wilt or something by the time, and I don't know. It's almost done. So,
Well, Robert Henry, I would have wanted you to buy the flowers, look at them.
and then get rid of them.
Yeah,
and then,
yeah. Let them wilt and go away because you've got like the flowers in your soul or whatever now.
Yeah.
And then you paint because you're so.
But I mean, I did start because I started initially like kind of looking at like a photo reference thing to help kind of guide me. And then I kind of stopped. Like I'd look at it for a bit and then like turn off my phone and put it away. And it did actually kind of help like focus and like think about it because I wasn't like looking around. It's like I just need to like feel out like what this needs to be. But I don't know. I just want to go do plein air stuff. That's why I got some things. Then I've also been asked to do another commission thing, which again I don't have much details. And then the insurance lady upstairs, I ran into her again. She's like, I want to talk to you about doing a portrait of my dog. Which I kind of want to do that. But
You could.
again, after reading this book, I'm like, I feel like some kind of weight where I'm like,
You have to
but
capture the dog's
it's like, but I don't,
soul
it's like,
impression
but I
on
don't
your
know
soul.
the dog. I don't know if I will see
But you
the
only
beauty
need to,
in the dog or
you
whatever.
only need to see the dog for a moment, and like in that moment, you've
Well, you
got
don't
to
need
like.
a moment. You just have to be able to find the thing. Because he talks about, he's like, you can spend as much time as you want observing whatever it is, but
it's the
when you
once
get to
you've
work,
captured like the thing,
mm-hmm.
then you have, like the rest of like the time with the model is just like reference, but
Yeah,
like that once you've got like, because it's like the model's constantly shifting, so it's like that moment you look at the model and kind of like grasp like the model's essence in that moment or whatever,
yeah,
and then it's like, so yeah, once you get that little dog's essence.
yeah. I don't even know if it's a little dog.
Oh,
I
yeah,
know
it could be
nothing
a
about
big
the dog. For all I know. It would be good practice. But it like feels overwhelming because it's like, well, what if I don't see the beauty in the dog the same way she sees it in our dog? And I'm probably overthinking it now. But
Well, if you're super into it or whatever, then it'll come across.
I should just do it. I'm like worried I'd take like way too long to do it though. I need to be more efficient with painting. I need to be less fussy about it. It's like hard not to. I should just, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm like working on learning how to paint from, because this thing is just requires experience, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't have a painting teacher.
And there's
At least nobody like right here to help out. I mean, my dad does a lot of gouache painting, but he's on the other side of the country, so I can't be like... Because it's one of those things where it's like just... You only can get so much help from like somebody like talking to you about something like that. Or even like watching a video or something. It's like...
I don't know, maybe you need
sometimes this you're like, oh, that was more helpful than like a verbal explanation, but still like you're a little bit like, yeah, but I have to like try the thing. But it's a very hands-on... I mean, it helps to watch somebody do it.
Yeah.
Like in person, but
you can't ask questions. if you've got a video.
Yeah. You can't be like, so like, what's your thought process with this? Or it's like, how are you making decisions on some of these things?
Yeah, or like specifically if you're like, okay, so what happens if like I have like a dark wood table and then like the orange like afternoon light hits it.
Mm-hmm.
Right, you're like, what is... You know, you can't ask them very specific like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a few years ago where I was like, now, 6 years too late, I need Sam.
That's kind of how I feel, where I'm like, maybe...
There's ateliers in Springville.
Yeah. There's like a... Yeah.
I modeled for a pretty good one, pretty intensive. It's very, very atelier, though, in the... Very technical, very...
Yeah, oh, I'm sure.
Very...
That thing is, that would, like, drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Because I've done... Like... I don't even... What's the longest pose I've done for figure drawing?
I've never done one like that. Like,
no, I know they can be like really long. I think the longest I've done was like 5 hours, like a 5-hour pose.
Because I held.
And that drove me crazy. I was just like, I can't do this.
I held the same pose for like 3 months.
Oof.
That kind of thing.
This seems...
Yeah, I don't know.
My animation brain is like not
too.
geared for that at all.
Yeah.
I was just like, if I'm like not feeling it after like 10 minutes, I start to be like, this isn't working. but the thing is with painting, like actually painting, you kind of have to be more methodical in a way. Generally.
But also, that's true.
But also, I've learned that you can kind of work stuff a lot more than you'd think. It's not as like, oh, shoot, well, that mark's there. There's a lot you can do to kind of like work with it. But
also, so we were talking about this the other day with this book. So this is old timey. So they didn't have animation and animators and 30-second gesture drawing.
mm-hmm.
He would have loved that.
Yeah.
But he talks a couple times in this book about, you know, an energetic gesture and gestures giving like the, you know, like having like really capturing the movement and the soul of what you're painting in like a gesture.
Oh, it's a very important thing to him. Like,
and so
he talks about that a lot, about gesture throughout. He's like, that's like what you need to be able to get. And like when he talks about lines too, he brings up like a lot of, he's like, there's lines that aren't marked. Right?
Yeah.
Where it's like there's lines in the way that like the pose works because of gesture that you need to consider. But yeah. Well, he brings up, I don't know, I can't remember, you've probably he's probably talked about it. I think he talks about multiple times about like when he would do like figure drawing classes with like drapery.
Yeah.
He would have the model like walk around the room, and then like the model would be like walking away, and he'd like yell to the model or something to get their attention, and like when they'd turn to look, he'd be like, stop right there, because he's like describes clothing as having a beginning and like it has like, it's not just like a thing that's there. It's a representation of like, it has a past and a future. And so just having like say they're a woman wearing a dress that's just static, it's like, no, it's like she was doing something before she was in that pose, and she's going somewhere. And so that's his idea, is like,
yeah,
the way the fabric lays is from like a previous action and like gestures towards a future action. It's like, that's really,
it's not draped over you like a tablecloth.
Yeah.
Like,
I was like, that's really interesting. Yeah. And that's like, yeah, he would love doing the kind of figure drawing classes that we did probably. Yeah, like, this is great. Doing like 1 minute poses.
He would have loved it. I think he would love the Ryan Woodward's and Glenn Keane's, you know, capturing these like, just like the energy of like a gesture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would have just tickled him pink.
Yeah.
Because he's very much like wishing to like imbue oil painting, which especially has to be a meticulous, tedious thing.
Well, yeah, it takes a long time to actually finish one.
Yeah, to like give paintings like the soul of like a gesture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's funny. That like immediately helped me, because I was, like I said, I'm illustrating some stuff, and I was starting to get really stiff without even noticing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me kind of like loosen up and start giving things more like animation.
Mm-hmm.
More energy.
Yeah. No, it
is so hard. He says it a couple times where he's like, painting is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, there's again, I've been doing mine just digital too, which still makes me feel lame. But yeah, because you're like, just every step is just brutal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're like, okay, I gotta draw a figure. Okay, I've got to like have perspective. I've finally started to like wrap my head around like these various parts.
Mm-hmm.
Because for a while, perspective just kicked my butt.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're like, you gotta have perspective, and then you're like, okay, we gotta. Then color's just like this gigantic monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I want to color it so that it's like its own unified piece, and then it's gotta have its soul and its feeling, and use colors to convey that, but also like accurately represent stuff. You know? Again, like what happens when the light hits this thing? You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, it gets like really tricky when you actually have to like physically mix paints.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I was like on top of that, like actual painting is like, you need to like get to know paints and painting.
Mm-hmm. Which there's that other book I got from the library that is like a paint mixing thing. It's actually really interesting.
Oh.
And I haven't like read through it. I just like look at random little parts, because a lot of it's just like, here's like a color mixing exercise.
Yeah.
But it has a lot where it like explains.
Oh, this is cool.
It's really interesting where they explain that like the way most people think pigments work, and they explain kind of how that actually works. Because a lot of people think of it kind of acting like pixels on a screen, where it's like, well, you got some pigments have some yellow and some blue and some red in there, and the little particles like form. They're close enough together that it looks like this color, and they're actually like, no, that's not actually how it works. In fact, you can't have like a pure blue. There's actually no like pigment that's actually like just blue. Because like whatever it's made out of is actually something that reflects like a specific wavelength. And that's like, but then there's other things in there that will reflect other specific wavelengths. And I don't remember exactly the whole thing, but basically the way they explain it is actually more like you should be thinking of it in terms of not red, blue, and yellow, but like orange, red, and like red, blue, and stuff. So, and like if you want to get like a good like purple, you need to actually mix like a more like purple-ish blue with a more purplish red, if that makes sense. Because those like have elements that then like I don't remember exactly was, but anyway, it made me realize that like dealing, because I've been doing, again, painting, and yeah, it's like not as straightforward as you'd think. It doesn't work like a color picker on Photoshop.
No, I've been.
And so it's like you start to be like, oh, like I can't get the same color of like if I want like a specific color green, I can't just use like my yellow and my blue necessarily to get that. It's like you have to be like, well, you're going to get different color greens if you use like an azo yellow with like an ultramarine blue versus if you were to use an azo yellow and like a phthalo blue. You're going to get different greens from those. And there's like no way to like make them work into the other green that you'd get, or at least not in any kind of like nice way. So it's really interesting. There's a reason why there's lots of different like greens and lots of different like purple paints that you can get. It's not just like, well, it's like not like a matter of convenience. It's like a matter of like the way colors mix. You need to have like those different I don't know, because they have a thing in there too where it has like a little like spectrograph things of various like pigments, and it shows like, you know, how ultramarine blue has like a pretty heavy like purple element to it. And things like that. It's just very interesting. And then you have like on top of that, like some have different like transparency qualities to them. So you're like, this gets complicated.
And you have to know it all just by experience.
Yeah. I mean, something like that helps.
Yeah.
Because definitely when I put together some of the stuff for my plein air stuff, because I'm not going to lug around all of my paint tubes. Because it kind of explains like you need at least like 6 colors for like the different biases of like basically like 2 different yellows for like a more red yellow and a more towards like green yellow, or I guess like an orange yellow and like a green yellow. Then you need like a green blue and like a purple blue, and you need a purple red and an orange red. and then you can use those to do a lot more versus if you just had like one red, one blue, and one yellow. But
Well, in the Robert Henri book, there's that part early on where he's like, just clear your palette, sit down with the paints, pull up a chair, and like mix colors.
yeah.
I know. It's just, it is overwhelming listening to him. And again, there's a couple times where he's like, wow, this is a lot, this is hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't even do it, and it just sounds hard. And again, I do this digital painting, and it behaves so differently.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like you almost have like the opposite problem where you have like, because with physical paints, like you're limited in like how you can handle it and what you can do with it. So you kind of have, but it's also like a lot more complicated with like mixing things and stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge, is like, how do I make stuff work with so little? But with digital painting, it's almost like the opposite, where you're like, I can literally do anything.
Yeah.
So it's like a matter of picking the right things out of like infinity choices, which is like its own problem to figure out. Because like one advantage with using physical paint is like, as you're like mixing stuff on the palette, everything kind of naturally unifies. You can't just be like suddenly be like, I'm gonna have this crazy like magenta thing show up. It'd be like hard to do almost. Whereas like in digital painting, it's a lot easier to be like, put in something into there where you're like, this is like, doesn't make sense.
Oh yeah, it's super, super easy. You have to do the thing, like when you see people just take like a little like pie slice out of a color wheel, and they're like, I'm only gonna work like in here. You have to do like that.
Yeah.
Like I've been doing that kind of thing, which is cool. Digitally, you as you work in there, you can discover you're like, oh, like, again, this is the way the digital acts. I don't really understand, but from my limited observation, the way the digital acts different, because as you desaturate, like say you're only working with reds, the way you start getting like blues and stuff is desaturating and getting cooler. Like more that other, like more so than maybe even like bumping farther down like toward the blue, but like desaturating and bumping down. But again, that's like a digital thing, because otherwise with physical paints, if you're desaturating, you're getting other effects probably with, because
well, it's like
white,
you have to, it
the
like
white
there's
acts
some
weird.
similar principles in a way, but the way you accomplish them is kind of different. Like the way you would desaturate is like you would have to do different things.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, I'll add some white or whatever.
That does
it's like it might be like, okay, well, I might have to add like yellow and like maybe some blue or something. Like there's ways, and maybe some white. I don't know. It gets tricky. It's definitely a different thing. For sure.
It does. It makes me want to do it real bad, but also not bad enough. You know, like, there's a couple times, again, in the book, The Art Spirit, where he's essentially like, you know, like, if this is like possesses your soul, then this is what you're going to do. And that makes me, I'm like, oh, well, I don't feel like I'm like quite, I'm pretty intrigued by it.
Yeah.
But not enough to like get me moving. To where I have to like bust out all the paints and draw like my backyard.
He's like, where he's like, you need to paint like a fiend.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I'm like, I don't always feel like that though. but I feel like I should. But I also wonder, like, part of me's like, I wonder if that's something I need to, like, develop in a way, because it's something I'm not used to doing
Yeah.
in a way. Because, yeah, I'm not used to painting. And, yeah. So it's almost a lot of it is just like, I get bogged down, I think, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I run into a lot of, like, blocks where I'm like, I get to a point where I'm like, I don't know what I should do to accomplish something right here. So it's like kind of a technical thing, which kind of gets in the way. But he talks about that too, where he's like, it's important to, like, get those tools, like technique and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's more of like being able to know how to handle problems and, like, develop technique, because it's just like a tool to you to use for whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Because he's very much against, like, developing, like, oh, I have this technique that I always use. He's like, no, it's like you should do whatever needs to work for what you're trying to accomplish, not, like, have what you do just to fit with what you've done in a way that you've done it before.
Yeah.
He's just like, you need to, and basically, I don't think he says it this way, but it's like, you need to know how to, like, solve the problems in your, whatever you're working on. And however it is that you solve that is the important thing, that you solve it. If you use a technique you have used before, that's fine. Or if you have to develop a whole new way of, like, approaching it, that's what you have to do. But don't be like, well, this is how I always do it. Like, that it should be primarily like, what does this need? Does it need me to do the same sort of underpainting technique I have been doing? Or does it need me to do something else? Do I need to be doing washes like I have been? Or should I be just, like, going in with, like, thick paint right away?
Yeah, it's you do,
It's
like,
just different ways of
whatever you need to do to, like, express the thing and not get, like, hung up on, like, any sort of hang up at all.
Yeah.
Like, he's also not into, getting hung up on any, like, any method or any schooling or anything really. It's just, I mean, you just said all that. I don't need to reiterate.
Because he talks about art schools a lot.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, makes sense, because they're all, like, lectures he gave at, like, various art schools. But I just think it's interesting. He's like, the value of going into art school is that you have, like, the other people around you that you're kind of working with. And he's like, whatever, like, the method that's being taught or whatever is not actually the important thing.
Yeah.
Because it's like, are you... Basically, he's saying, like, the only people who actually get something out of school are the people who can teach themselves, who are, like, self-educating. Otherwise, you just become somebody that just, like, by rote, just duplicates whatever it is. And it's like, your goal shouldn't be to do that. You should, like, be somebody that tries to learn things. And school helps you with that. It's like, you should be trying to be like, what's, like, the fundamental here that I get out of this? Not being like, tell me what to do. It's like, your approach should not be thinking, I need these people to tell me what to do. I need my professor to tell me what to do. Or whatever your teacher is or whatever. It's like, it should be like, oh, this is helpful. Why is it helpful? Like, what? Basically, it's like, you need to be, like, thinking about it in a way.
Yeah, and you need to essentially be like, hey, I've got this thing I want to express, and I'm like here to like gather knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like get
You're there to get tools to be
yeah
able to
yeah tools.
to use in your own process and your own work, and that's ultimately what it is you're acquiring tools, and you should have them available to use, but you shouldn't be having the tools use you.
Yeah. Yeah, he kind of over the course of these many chapters sort of paints a picture of this person who's like very like passionate, alive, and has thought through everything very thoroughly and knows what they're about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, Also, is this interesting when he's talking about when he was going to school in Paris, and like his like little apartment that he was in, where he's like, some days like looking out my little window there, it was like I'd be so inspired, and it's like kind of like if he was in a good mood sort of a thing, where he's like everything was beautiful about it. It's like my little stove was wonderful. It was like a cozy thing. But then if I was just having a bad day, it'd be like, this place is cramped. It's uncomfortable. It's like so much of like what was going on inside himself affected how he kind of perceived his little living space. I thought it was interesting. Where he's like, even though there's like beautiful stuff outside, he'd just be like, oh, it's grimy or whatever. He talks about that. I don't remember where. It's like in the middle somewhere.
I can't like recommend this book enough. It's so good. Even if you're not, I mean, we're not oil painters. It's a book for oil painting, but it's anybody who's doing art, and also like kind of anybody
could read it and get something.
It's really, really, really good. I don't know. So it's not. It's like a collection of lectures, letters, essays, stuff like that. So it's not really.
It's not like a book.
Yeah, but
it's a compilation of.
So yeah, he has a couple section where he like talks about students, and they're really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it is just that thing where essentially he's saying that the student. I mean, well, Philip already said it, but the student needs to be like self-taught, and then it kind of doesn't matter. Like the student will go and take what that student needs and learn.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't get like bogged down by like the methods or like the ideology or like whatever's like being taught there, like.
Mm-hmm.
Because Robert Henri really doesn't like, getting like paying too much homage to like artistic traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Or anything like that, right? And I think there's always like the threat of that happening in like an institution where you're like, oh yes, let's study these old masters, and clearly their methods and ways, let's emulate them, and that's very important.
Yeah.
And again, he'd just be like, these are tools, and if you can use this tool, then do it.
Yeah.
because you're like making this you're like a bright awake, you're like problem solving individual, and you're like, oh yes, like I don't need this like old master's technique for what I'm doing, or you're like, oh yes, that is very useful,
Yeah.
you know
Well,
you're
his
discerning.
his like when he's talking about that too, he's like he explains like the way that like a lot of old masters stuff worked, where he's like they'd do a gray scale like
Yeah,
value painting, and then they would go over with what's the term, glazes for the color. And he's like, it's very meticulous and it takes a long time to do it that way. And that's what made sense for what they were doing. Basically, he's saying like there's a context for like what they were doing, and there's so many things going on that made that technique and approach make sense. It's like you don't have to do that. It's like
yeah,
what it is that makes sense for you to do isn't necessarily what made sense for like what like Rubens did, or like Michelangelo or something. Like you can learn a lot from it, but that doesn't mean that what they did was like the one way or like the best way. It's just what was correct to do for them at that time for what they were doing. And it's about recognizing that and like knowing, again, acquiring that tool of understanding, or from understanding why that worked for them.
yeah.
Because at some, you might not never need to do that. You might not need to do anything like that. But if you do, it's handy to know. It's kind of like thing where he's like, it's like, are you having trouble with like drawing like straight lines? It's like, get a maul stick. Don't worry. Don't like feel bad about using that.
Yeah.
It's like, just like, yeah, he's very much about like tools in the sense of actual tools, but also intellectual tools. Everything is about like having things at your disposal to use and not being beholden to any of them.
Yeah. Yeah, not getting like hung up on any. Yeah. Yeah, and the book is it's nice. It's obviously nice to have a physical copy. I grabbed one from the library, but also it's in the public domain, so it's all over the internet.
Yeah.
Like it's easy. Again, he's Philip's listening to a version, and I'm listening to a completely different version that somebody made on YouTube, which is really actually really well done. Um, yeah, so easy to get a hold of this book.
Yep.
This book is not hard to get a hold
I'm
of.
gonna get a physical copy.
And it's really accessible. We were talking about he sounds so nice in this book, and the picture of him when we were seeing pictures of him, he looks kind of stern. He looks kind of mean, but in this book, he's very like accessible.
Yeah.
He sounds very gracious.
Mhm. No, he sounds like a really nice guy.
Yeah. So he probably was.
Yeah.
His pictures look stern.
I feel like everybody's pictures probably looked like that then. Because I don't remember how old he was for... Because this image is probably when he was younger. Because I think when he... Because he died in like... Was it the late 20s, I think? I don't know. I think like a lot of these lectures are from when he was like probably like 50 or 60 or something.
I don't know.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know enough about the guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So it's like that picture is probably from like 1900 or something.
Yeah.
Though some of the stuff is from like 1904 or something, I think. Some of it's earlier, but some of it's like in the 20s, some of it's like earlier than that. It's kind of from like a broad range of times, I think.
Yeah. Probably from like all across his career.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. I don't think it doesn't really say like letter like 1896 or something. It just
On
says.
the one I'm listening to, it will say like letter to
Oh, I
like
guess
the
this does right here.
the like girls
Never mind.
Academy of Arts or something in New York,
Yeah.
like 1911 or something.
1913. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really good, and we haven't even. We could almost go like.
Yeah.
Pick-
We've kind of just been picking out some of the random bits that we remember.
Because I was looking at my notes, and there's all sorts of stuff that I'm like, I could bring this up, and it's like its own thing to talk about. It's just lovely discussions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he gets a lot of like very philosophical about things.
Yeah, it's nice too because there's some like, he gets really philosophical, and then there'll be like some stuff that's very technical, but you can tell it's all intertwined because he's like a practicing artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's a practicing artist, so like, somebody who's coming from that point of view like always kind of knows what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like the philosophy and the practical stuff is like intertwined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he almost has like whole sections where it's like almost entirely like it'll be like a lecture at like an art school, and it's like almost the entire thing is him just being like, you need to live a life worth living.
Yeah.
It's like almost nothing really terribly like specific about painting or anything. He's just like, you need to live a life and be able to use that to like bring that into your work. And that's like about like the most like art it gets into, and it's more just like, this is how you should be like thinking about your life and like your relationship with the world around you.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's kind of like a nice break because it'll be like right after a chapter he's like going into like the technicalities of like how oil paint settles and stuff, and then he's like, let's talk about your life and how you should think about it.
Yeah. Over the course of the book, he does kind of paint a lovely picture of this sort of person that it's sort of like an ideal person, but again, it's functional because it's like this person who is essentially like how would you put it? Got their living life with their whole heart in it.
Mm-hmm.
But because he thinks that you gotta kind of be like that, and also very like constantly mentally engaged, and then that's the kind of person that's gonna have the ability to like capture the beautiful moment and then retain it because they've practiced. Their mind is really awake, and they see the beautiful sunset on the mountains, and not only can they kind of retain that, but then they can articulate it to themselves, and then they can paint it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they have like the ability to see the beauty, kind of like process the beauty, and then they have a medium to express it, and they've kind of like gone through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it makes me feel like not that.
It's like in a way you're like, you almost feel like, oh, I'm doing everything wrong.
Yeah. It's very like inspiring, but
it's inspiring because you're like, oh, these are things you can develop. Because that's a very much his thing is like, these are things you can accomplish. Like you can accomplish being able to see and like recognize and articulate beauty. But it's not easy to do. So it's like, don't feel bad if you don't quite comprehend how to go about that.
Yeah.
A lot, but that's like goes for so many things. Like I like his whole thing where he talks about when he like learned how to like paint heads and like realizing that like I can't, how did he talk about it? He's like wrapping your to truly like understand, like to see through and around a head and not just being like what it is that you're seeing on the model. He's like, I spent like months or something trying to wrap my head around like the idea of that. But he's like, it's important to be able to do that because you're like internalizing like the whole thing. Because yeah, he gets like pretty technical about like anatomy and stuff, but it's mixing it with his like almost metaphysical approach to like the interior of the world and yourself.
Yeah, because he says, I think in that same chapter, he's like, some people just see the features, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I draw the nose, how the nose looks, and the eyes, how the eyes look. But he's all about, he's like, this isn't his word, but it's like he's trying to capture like the soul of the head that he sees.
Mm-hmm.
He says undercurrent a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about like cultural trends like come and go, or like you're like, oh, I'm trying to remember. But essentially, yeah, you're trying to like find like the undercurrent or kind of like the soul of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That hold on, I drew a blank with that. Because I liked that part because I like things that, you know, I like I don't like art or stuff that has like current the intellectual ideas or like current like ideological messages, because those are kind, because he's just like those change constantly.
Yeah, and it's like what it's like it'll be meaningless,
Yeah.
you know, in like not that long. Whereas like capturing something like the joy of a child is a timeless thing that somebody could look at that thing that you did
Yeah.
100 years from now and know, like understand that. Whereas like if you made something where it's like this is about this thing going on right now, well, people might not know or care about that, and you're not, because it's in a way it's like you have concepts and things that are they themselves also kind of just the surface sort of a thing, just like drawing just like maybe a perfect features of a face that's just the external aspect of like that face.
Yeah.
And same thing, you could have that with other things as well, which is kind of, he talks about like trendy things or like consensus ideas or whatnot. That's one thing he talks about with like art schools, where he's like, one problem you have to look out for is like, is there like a consensus among like whatever space that is? It's like you don't need to, you shouldn't be like worrying about that, you know. Will your work get stifled by like a consensus or something? It's like, are you doing something because, or not doing something because like those around you expect or don't expect that?
Yeah.
That's a, I mean, you mentioned it a little bit, but he's very much like, don't worry about creeds and ideologies and kind of like what other people think. It's like more just like when you're doing your work, it's like it needs to just come from like a sincere like internal like interest in like self-understanding and like that creation of beauty from your own understanding of that.
Yeah.
Is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. Cause yeah. Again, I feel like I'm paraphrasing him badly and like like giving my own words because I can't remember what he said.
He really says so many things
I know.
because of how like because of the way the book is, because it's from so many different random things. It's like you like hear all these like it'll be like, oh, that's good and that's good, and all of a sudden it's like, well, now here's this like critique letter.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, these are good too. And then you're like, crap, this is like all over the place in my brain.
It is. Well, at first I almost skipped the very technical things because I was like, I'm not an oil painter. But then I didn't. I listened to them and they're so good too.
Yeah.
Like they helped me out a lot in like I was like, I'm not an oil painter, but now I'm just gonna change how I approach like the background of my little digital painting.
Yeah. Because I mean, in some of those, he'll like talk about. I haven't done it so much, but like he has a whole thing where he's like, just work. You should be working with like. He calls it like pure colors or whatever. Where he's like, it's like don't worry about trying to like. I think I talked to you in the gym about it, where it's like mixing too much like white or something, where it's like screwing with that and like either like over darkening or over like washing out like colors to try and get like a more real look. When it's like instead of like if you see like a mountain that's like blue and the beauty of that blue, in real life it might be kind of hazy, but maybe it's like when you paint it, don't try and capture that. It's like if that's just like an atmospheric thing necessarily, sort of a thing, where he's like just attack it with like more pure colors and try and get like your value through that contrast of some of those, rather than trying to finagle your whites into there to get it just the right real color or whatever. Yeah, and he's like, I mean, because what does he say? He's like, the laws of nature have their own rules, and the laws of your medium has their rules. Yeah. And you must work within the rules of your medium. Because, like the way your pigments work isn't the same way as the light that you're seeing works. So it's like, work with the pigments and use that to create the beauty that you're internalizing, really. Yeah. Rather than trying to like copy what you're seeing in, say, like a landscape or in a model or something. But yeah, that's like something where it's like, that's not, I don't do oil painting, but I'm like, immediately I'm like, I could see that being useful in any kind of painting. Yeah, I started trying not to like, but again, it's hard. Digital, it is different. I was like trying to like find like, well, I was trying to do the thing he said in that same chapter where he's like, essentially represent things with warm and cool, like represent the movement between light and shadow with warm and cool, and not with value, not so not like in the case of oil painting mixing white in, because that does something to your paints. Yeah. But in the case of digital painting, just desaturating, I guess. So I've been I was trying to mess with that. I like haven't quite wrapped my head around it. I was only doing that just today. So give me like a week and I might like I might be able to like tell you a little more about that.
because I just started, but it was interesting for sure. Where I was like representing, the shift, a shift in space with warm and cool and not with value. Um, what was
Mm.
I don't.
No, it's like so many things.
I know. I almost want us to like.
And like his whole things where he talks about lines. He has a whole big
Yeah.
thing about lines and thinking about that and how there's all sorts of lines that exist, and it's like in one situation one type of line could not look good, but in a whole nother instance it might be exactly what's needed. And it's all about knowing like kind of that symbol that each line represents, and like knowing when to apply that to get like the effect you want.
Yeah, I think is essentially the way the kind of a correlation that I made to wrap my head around that chapter was thinking, because at first I was like, what's he talking about? Like, I kind of get it.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, oh, it's just like he's talking about calligraphy essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how it kind of made sense in my mind, where you're like, yeah, like just expression with a mark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because, yeah, I don't know if it's that same chapter, if it's a different, where he talks about brushstrokes. And, brushstrokes that have,
It's
like,
probably
different
the same.
feelings.
Yeah, it's probably the same one.
And, like, again, just something where you're like, oh, well, suddenly now I have to think of that, too.
Yeah.
Because if I'm just, like, throwing marks willy-nilly on my digital painting, you're like, okay, well, what is this? Again, it's what he wants, is he wants you to think about it and be, like, thoughtful.
Well, it's basically, he's like, every single time you lay something down, you should be thinking about it.
Well, thank you, Eliza.
Yeah, thanks for listening in.
We should.
I know, it's...
We should go to bed. That's the problem, is I keep thinking it's hard not to just jump from thing to thing, because it is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the whole even like the extended philosophy of the idea that like, say I look at the mountain, I capture that moment. Yeah, I wondered who the mystery person was. We saw there was a person, but these mystery people. The mystery person was Piper.
Extra.
Justin was the other, but he piped up.
Yeah, he said something at
So
some point.
we ID'd him. He's been ID'd. But yeah,
We're all tired. But we hadn't done this in a while, so we had to...
Yeah. I know, we just sort of decided we'd go for it, even though it was super late, because it's been forever. Yeah, is that baby Justin? Cute little baby Justin?
I can't even see.
I'm going to go up close so I can see it. Little baby Justin. Oh, yeah, we should call it. But yeah, because it just...
Was this...
But just the idea, essentially, that I see the mountain, and that's what I'm seeing is like, it's the product of my senses, right? Like, it's the image created in my head. That'll never be the same ever again.
Yeah.
That's one point he's making. Like, not only is the model moving,
yeah,
but your mind is constantly moving. So you like just have to latch onto that beauty impression.
Because that's like an aspect of it.
Yeah.
There's a fleeting feeling that you have.
But also it's it's that image was also the factor, or your mental state was a factor.
Yeah.
In that moment too. Like he said, like his little apartment in Paris was magical and charming and wonderful when he was in a good mood, right? And he's looking out over all the sights of Paris.
Yeah.
And he's in his charming little ratatouille apartment. And then when he was in a bad mood, he was like, "Oh, this is a crappy little garbage apartment with broken tiles and it stinks." And but yeah, that's an interesting, that's like its own conversation with art, because you're like, yeah, it's completely. I can't, like, if I'm just drawing like a mountain and I'm like copying it as, technically you can never really do that.
Yeah.
Because your mind is just like a shifting way, or it's like a constantly shifting thing. Oh yeah, back before Justin became
old
and bitter and and was buffeted by the waves of life. I'll put that more poetically some other time. I mean, I just didn't want to use time because he already said time, but buffeted by time. Before youth's energy is turned cynical with experience or whatever. But yeah. Yeah, the effect of like our mental state right in that moment. That's pretty interesting. I don't think very much about that. Before, whatever, you got to, if it was snowy and cold, you just got to stay in all, walk from class to class through their nice warm hallways. I mean, they're hallways like with like gigantic weird colored pipes everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the first things he talks about is the colored pipes. No, the mind state. I think that's like the first thing where he's like,
yeah,
every stroke is affected by your mental state.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting.
And that's how he just segues into like a lot of the internal things and approach. Which it's definitely true. Like if you're not like certain about what you're doing, or you're like, if you're like stressed out, that can affect it.
Or if your mind is elsewhere.
Yeah, if you're not like,
that's a big one for me.
Focused on it, that will like affect a lot of like how you work. If you work at all.
Yeah, I have, that's a big one. I have a big YouTube problem where I'll have something playing while I work, and it can
get distracted.
Yeah, it can be very easily like distracted.
Yeah, there's times where I just like have to take my headphones off or whatever and just kind of like have silence.
Yeah. I'm good about doing that when there's something that like a very obvious problem to solve, but when I'm kind of like filling in like color or something, it's hard for me not to like turn something on and reading and listening to this book. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to like I'm supposed to like be fully engaged here too.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing. I'm supposed to be fully engaged in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Even when I'm like coloring in line work, right? Because you'd be like, well, the strokes of your lines important too, and you're like, oh gosh, dang it. Sometimes I just want to listen to a thing and go on autopilot and like do line work.
Yeah. He's like, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
All right, I guess we should call it.
Yeah.
Before.
I've been awake for
Oh yeah.
like about 22 hours now.
This is not.
I woke up really early this
I mean,
morning.
plan was just to kill Philip. Actually, I was trying to like finish him off. I was trying to have him have a sleepy breakdown.
But it was good to finally
Yeah.
do another little thing.
Yeah. No, this book is a find. This was a good find.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's lots of little essays and stuff that I've read over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what? Why are we demonetized? Because I'm talking about homiciding Philip? Why are we demonetized? Yeah. But this guy is like the realest deal.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like Ralph Waldo Emerson has like a couple essays on art, and they're pretty awesome. But he's not an artist,
Yeah.
right? He's just a smart guy
Yeah.
who's talking smartly about his experience looking at art.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this Robert Henri is like the realest deal.
Mm-hmm. Very like in it.
Yeah.
He's very much like fully committed. Like his whole life is just being an artist.
Yeah. And he's again, if you read it, he's super nice and gracious, not mean like his picture. It's a little, I don't know, because like the Tolstoy essay we read, Tolstoy is also the real deal, but that was very like curmudgeonly.
Which I also like.
Yeah, it's hard not to like it. It's the Ratatouille thing. It's the negative criticism is fun to read and write.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Tolstoy one was fun. But this one, Robert Henri, he feels a lot more like gracious.
Yeah.
Even though like he has like people to like pick on too.
Yeah.
But
he never like is specific.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one where the closest I think he gets is where he's like, yeah, when I was art school, there was this guy I was in school with who was working on stuff, and I went back like 12 years later. He was still in school, and he was still doing the same things. Yeah. He doesn't say who it is, but he's just like, he was a really good technical painter.
Which, if you read the rest of his stuff, that's like not a very good compliment from him.
Yeah. It's like probably the most negative thing towards like a specific person that he doesn't name.
Oh, wait.
But he's like very... It's like the nicest kind of diss, really.
Wait, no, there was a good diss. Hold on, I'm trying to remember what it was, because there's no way I can find it. Where he's talking about... Oh my gosh, what was it? See if I can jog your memory. Where he's like, when this like, he's talking about the person who's like completely like calm and boring and level-headed, and that person was like not very excited about him, and he's like, good.
Oh.
He was like, oh, what was it? I just remember it was a pretty good diss.
I don't remember that.
I know, I don't know where to find it, but what was it? Because it was saucy. He was essentially like, I don't remember what he said at all, but he was essentially like, if this kind of person thinks I'm boring, then good.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, we can't get saucy, juicy disses from 1900 guy because I can't remember what it was.
find it later.
Yeah, I'll find it later. But yeah, there was that one too.
Yeah.
And just in general, if you're at an art school and you are beholden to trends and traditions, he doesn't think you're very cool.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. Or in general, if you're beholden to trends and traditions, and he doesn't think you're very cool. Okay. Get dissed on. Whoever's still here. Justin or Piper.
I think it's just probably just Justin. I don't know.
I don't know.
But we should probably go sleep.
Yeah. Again, I'm just trying to wear Philip into the ground. My motive, I'm not sure. So that I can inherit something.
You can
inherit I'm trying to get rid of the uncles so that finally I can inherit custody of Maki. once I do in Jason.
You have to get past me first.
Yeah, I have to get rid of all the other uncles. All the other Maki uncles. Anyway. Okay, night. Night, everyone. Oh, yeah, sorry. We should have
That's alright.
called that one half an hour ago.